All right, we aren't here for vague advice or, those feel-based drills.
No, not today.
We are here for the cheat code to your golf swing. And this is taken directly from Biomechanics labs, from expert analysis. Today, we're really replacing feel with fact.
Absolutely. The goal is to build a rotational engine that's powerful, efficient, and most importantly, something you can repeat.
It's the ultimate deep dive into the physiology.
It is. We're dismantling this idea that the golf swing is just arms and hands. Instead, we're focusing on the kinetic chain.
That precise sequence of energy transfer from the ground up.
Exactly. And understanding this chain is really the shortcut to understanding why certain flaws in your swing they persist. And, critically, how one small adjustment can unlock massive speed.
Okay, so let's unpack this scientific manual for power.
Yeah.
If the kinetic chain is the boss here, then the foundation, the setup, has to be the most crucial step.
It is.
Our sources are crystal clear on this. Energy accumulation begins with how you address the ball. So what is that one foundational element that loads the body for that first move?
It has to be stable posture and core preparation.
Okay.
When you're setting up, we're looking for feet grounded, hips slightly back, creating that sort of athletic hinge, a long neutral spine, and the core is already engaged.
So it's not a passive stance.
Not at all. It's active. This setup immediately loads your glutes and your hamstrings. It puts the muscles on stretch, readying them to create tension and accumulate all that rotational energy.
I think most amateur golfers, they stand over the ball thinking about their grip, not their glutes.
Right.
So if you skip that core engagement, maybe you're standing a little too tall or you're hollowing out your lower back, what's the immediate costly consequence?
Well, the consequence is catastrophic for your sequencing. I mean, if the central stabilizing muscles aren't braced, the body searches for stability somewhere else.
And it defaults to compensation.
It does. The most common look is the hips driving forward way too early, the posture collapsing toward the ball, and just a total loss of control over your center of mass.
So instead of being ready to coil around a central point, you've essentially short-circuited the power source before the backswing even starts.
You've let it all leak out.
You've allowed the rotational energy to just leak before you've even moved the club.
Right.
What's the physical penalty for the golfer who does that?
The penalty is multifaceted, but the biggest loss is vertical force generation. If you move your hips forward on the takeaway, you can't push down into the ground effectively during the transition.
Oh, okay.
You lose that stored vertical energy, which is essential for maximum speed. It might feel fast, but you're not generating power from the ground up.
That brings us directly to the engine room, what biomechanists call the power zone. We all think of six-packs when we hear core, but what does that term really cover in the context of generating club head speed?
Yeah, the biomechanical definition is much broader than just the abs. It's the entire network of stabilizing muscles. So the lower back, the pelvis, the hips, it all acts as the stabilizing hub.
And its job isn't to create movement.
No, its job is to resist unwanted movement.
Let's dig into that resistance then. If a golfer manages to engage that power zone correctly at setup, what specific positive mechanics allow them to start accumulating torque for the backswing?
So when the core is correctly braced, and I mean engaged, not rigid, we see controlled movement. The first key move is what we call hip depression.
Hip depression.
The hips actually depress or sink slightly into the coil. They absolutely do not push or shoot forward toward the target line.
So what does that do for you?
It achieves two things. It maintains your center of mass over the midline, and it maximizes the stretch on the glutes and hamstrings.
So it's almost like sinking down into a shallow chair rather than shoving your hips forward.
That's a perfect analogy. And that controlled resistance allows rotational energy to be stored and then, crucially, released with precision right through the impact zone.
This is critical because it's the exact opposite of the most common fault we see in amateur golf, which is that, desperation for speed. When the core is relaxed, the body just opens up too early, the hips thrust forward, and the mass shifts way off the midline. That classic forward lunge gets mistaken for power because it feels powerful.
It feels aggressive.
But it instantaneously ruins the kinematic sequence. If I'm doing that forward lunge, what specific part of the swing am I destroying the most?
You're destroying the critical sequencing and, in turn, the consistency of your contact. If you lunge forward, your lower body has already released its stored energy way too soon.
So the upper body has to play catch-up.
Exactly. The upper body tries to catch up, leading to a shoulder throw or an over-the-top move because the arms are forced to release early. You trade consistency and your potential top-end speed for an inefficient early burst of muscle.
So the core is really the king of stability, but that stability has to interact with movement. And our sources point out one muscle group that dictates how smoothly that rotation happens,
Yeah.
the hamstrings. They're often just seen as muscles of flexibility, but the sources paint them as managers of tension and stability. Why are they so overlooked in the biomechanics of the swing?
They are drastically underestimated. I think we need to stop viewing them as simply long or short muscles and start seeing them as dynamic guides.
Dynamic guides.
They coordinate the pelvis and the lower spine during the entire rotational arc. They allow the pelvis to tilt correctly at setup and then maintain that tilt during the coil and uncoil. It's essential for effective torque.
So usable movement is the key phrase here. If I can touch my toes, but my hamstrings are rigid when I try to rotate, is that passive flexibility actually useless?
Functionally, yes. It's the huge distinction between passive flexibility, just holding a stretch, and dynamic, usable length under load. If you have tight, rigid hamstrings, they actively resist the proper coil.
And they force the body into those familiar protective compensatory patterns.
Yes.
What does that compensation look like out on the course?
It's the golfer who stands up too early in the backswing, or whose pelvis just shifts sideways instead of rotating cleanly. The hamstrings resist that stretching force, which forces the lower back to take up the slack.
And you lose your spine angle.
You lose your spine angle. And if that isn't maintained, the body has to push forward or stand tall just to reach the ball. And that leads to all those inconsistent contacts we call thin or fat shots.
So usable length means the hamstrings facilitate rotation without forcing the spine to change its angle.
That's the key.
Wow, that paints a vivid picture of the consequences. If they resist the coil, the core can't load properly, you're forced to abandon your posture. Okay, let's put these pieces, stability and usable length, together and walk through the movement sequence, the story of the swing.
This is the three-act narrative of a great golf swing, and the order is, it's non-negotiable.
Act 1, the backswing initiation. The first movement is not the arms.
Correct. The initiation should feel like a coordinated stretch, starting with that subtle hip depression we discussed, sinking slightly to generate ground force.
And then the rotation sequence begins.
Yes, moving sequentially.
Yeah.
Hips, then the torso, followed by the shoulders. You are literally winding a powerful spring, maximizing the separation between your hips and your shoulders.
So the crucial element here is preserving tension, not just maximizing distance. If I coil deep but I lose that tension, say my core just gives up, have I actually sacrificed power even if the club went farther back?
Absolutely. The backswing is all about creating controlled resistance and accumulating tension, not just reaching a static position. Maximum speed is achieved not by maximizing rotation depth, but by maximizing rotation stability.
And if you maintain that stability, you have a much higher ceiling for speed later on.
A much higher ceiling.
That leads us right into Act 2, the transition and downswing. This is where the sources say most swings just break down. What needs to happen in that split second between backswing and downswing?
This is the moment of truth. At the top of the swing, the lower body initiates the transition. The hips begin rotating toward the target, but, and we have to emphasize this, they must not drive forward off the midline. The braced core is actively resisting the premature firing of the upper body. That bracing is the secret sauce. It creates lag, and it maximizes the stretch shortening cycle.
I get the rubber band analogy. You're stretching the upper body against the lower body. But won't holding that tension feel slow to a golfer who's been trained to just hit it hard?
It will.
How do you reconcile that feeling with the science?
That's the counterintuitive part. It feels slow precisely because the biggest muscles, the hips and core, are moving first. That allows the smaller, faster segments, the arms and club, to accelerate dramatically later. The sensation isn't one of pushing hard, it's one of uncoiling powerfully.
So if that core is braced and it's delaying the release, we see that classic kinematic sequencing firing correctly.
Yes, the definitive order confirmed by all the research. Hips uncoil first, followed sequentially by the torso, then the arms, and finally the club head just snaps through.
And that order ensures each segment passes its energy to the next.
Exactly. The hips clear the way, creating the space and leverage for the torso and arms to whip through.
Let's define what happens if that sequence fails. If the core gives up, if that rubber band snaps too early, what does that feel like in the swing?
It feels like the arms take over. If the torso or the arms fire before the hips have fully cleared, the club comes down on a path that is usually too steep or outside in.
The classic slicer block.
Right. You get an early burst of speed, but the club head decelerates through impact because the body is just out of sync.
Which brings us to Act 3, the impact position. If we execute that perfect sequence, what is the ultimate objective now that the kinetic chain is firing correctly?
The objective is total rotation with controlled extension. At the moment of impact, the hips have rotated vigorously toward the target line, but they haven't stalled out. The torso and shoulders have unwound, and crucially, the core synchronizes the body's extension right through the hitting zone.
That's key. The body doesn't lunge at the ball. It extends through the ball with coordinated muscle activation. That's what creates that crisp sound of solid contact.
And if we zoom out, the science confirms this, that hips, torso, arms order is the fundamental biomechanical requirement to maximize energy transfer. When the sequence is right, club head speed goes up dramatically and dispersion tightens.
The low point of the swing becomes incredibly consistent.
Exactly.
It's the moment the physics feels like poetry. But if any link in that chain is weak, an unstable core, tight hamstrings, poor setup compensation is inevitable.
And compensation is a tax on your swing. It means loss of power because you're substituting a lunge for rotation, inconsistent ball flight because your contact point is always moving, and potentially injury.
So what does this all mean for the golfer who's looking to improve today? Let's distill the core truth we've extracted from these sources.
First, movement quality matters more than muscle quantity. Focus on the path and timing, not just raw effort.
Second, core engagement is the non-negotiable pre-swing foundation. Brace it at address.
Third, those hamstrings have to be usable, dynamic guides. They need to facilitate rotation, not be these rigid obstacles.
Fourth, sequence is king. Remember that hips, torso, arms chain reaction. It cannot be rushed. It cannot be reversed.
And fifth, and this is maybe the toughest mental cue, is that the hips must drive back into rotation and down into depression, never forward into extension during that transition.
When you execute these 5 elements with precision, what you get is the most elegant biomechanical expression, maximum power from a stable center, leveraging physics instead of trying to overpower the ball.
It's efficiency yielding speed.
A fantastic deep dive into the swing's central engine. So, if maintaining tension and rotational stability is the key to maximizing speed, here's our final thought for you to chew on this week. It builds on the source's emphasis on preserving tension. Consider how the concept of overswinging might be more accurately defined as a loss of core resistance that happens too early in the backswing, rather than just an issue of how far back you take the club. So, what small change in your setup posture today, specifically that initial hip depression and core brace, could yield immediate and noticeable stability gains? Think about that the next time you step up to the tee.